Tuesday, November 4th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Today on the show, we are talking mental health and wellness. It's focused around university students, but it is a conversation that will have points for us all. And speaking of points for us all, as you're listening, right, if you have thoughts around mental wellness, mental health, mental illness, if something does come up that you want to add to the conversation, you can email us, thesignal@cbc.ca, or text us, 709-327-8206. Full house here today. You know, Matt Wheeler, we'll start with you because we've been talking about doing the show for a bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so do you want to fill folks in on some of the backstory of just how we got here?
Yeah. So, mental wellness is something that's pretty important to me.
Yeah.
Especially in the university population, there's so many different aspects that students can experience that can affect their well-being. And I guess we've been talking since August, I think
so,
about
yeah.
trying to get together. So initially trying to figure out getting a show set up for getting ready for school, but life happens,
Yeah.
and we're here.
Life and elections and everything else.
I know, so many things, right? But this is actually a great time of year for us to be talking about it for two reasons. I mean, we're almost to the end of the semester, which can cause a lot of stress for students. But this is particularly a really great week for us because Memorial just launched the Thrive Week around student wellness and talking about some of the programming that's available.
All right, so I'm going to look at Kelly Neville now. Hi, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. So you're the wellness lead at Memorial's Student Wellness and Counselling Center.
I am.
Tell us about that.
Tell you about Thrive Week.
Yeah, Thrive Week and also, the center and a bit about yourself. Wherever you want to go.
I could take up the whole hour and no one else would get an opportunity to speak then.
I mean, that might be okay.
Yeah, no. Very important people sitting here today.
It is true. I promise we'll get to them. So tell us about Thrive Week.
So Thrive Week is an initiative for students and employees at Memorial that we started, oh my goodness, must have been almost 10 years ago now. So it's the first week of November. It's when we actually signed on for a mental health and well-being campus for all as a community at Memorial. So that includes students, staff, and faculty. So what we do during Thrive Week is we want people to flourish. So we have a listing of activities, events, and initiatives that everyone can attend. Yesterday, Matt spoke at our grand opening and the ribbon cutting with our president, and they opened the week with cutting the ribbon, but Matt gave a great speech about his own experience, which is so important to the mental health and well-being of others, and which also brings this group together as MUN Minds, a peer supporter program. So Thrive Week is, we have the snuggle time with the kittens, the goats.
So I didn't even know we were going here. Snuggle time with kittens and goats. I'm loving this already.
Yeah. You should drop over just to see our Zen Den, which opened yesterday. So everyone can come in there and have a few moments just to relax, listen to the calming, could be crickets or birds or the ocean, lay down on the yoga mats, sit in the comfy air bag. They're like a beanbag chair, but no beans in them. So, but lots of, so mindfulness, Oasis will be part of this as well, which is a very large signature event that we do for students in which we have the painting, the popcorn with the chaplains. Jump in, guys. Gals, So
with Oasis events too, there's a lot of organizations at the university who are going to be there. They're there to try and connect with students, to try and make sure that they know what resources are there. But I think something we'll probably get into later is well-being is not just about having specific programmed resources. It's just kind of having a sense of community and a sense of belonging for those students to have, right?
And that's certainly what happens at this event, as Tariq can certainly attest to, and Haley being very involved in that event that we do. So it meets, one of the things that's a huge issue for students at MUN is food insecurity. Yeah. So we have snacks, a large amount of snacks that we offer on that day. So students are enjoying that. We have approximately 400 students through that event every week.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So there's the painting, as I said, the popcorn, the therapy dogs from St. John Ambulance, planting seeds with mindfulness. I'm probably missing lots.
Yeah, there's lots to talk about with that programming for sure, but it covers a lot of the aspects of well-being underneath.
Well, let me bring Tariq Al-Sidawi into this conversation. So you're a social work student.
Yes, I am.
An outreach coordinator with MUN Minds.
That's right.
Tell me more about MUN Minds.
So MUN Minds, basically we started in 2015, 2014. So we're a student-led mental health organization on campus. So we offer many various services like drop-in one-on-one peer support. And we also offer in like group peer support. So for example, last year we had international, the peer support group. And with the drop-in, what we try to do is we try to have it in our office. It's totally free. You can come in at any time. All you have to do is just come in, walk in, and there will be a student, and that student is trained in ASSIST, which is like the assisted suicide intervention, and then there's the mental health first aid. So with that, you're reassured that the student can actually give you support, and it's completely confidential, completely free, and our goal is to get across with the university population. I mean, many factors, and due to systemic issues, there's long waiting times for counseling. Yeah. And we are there as an organization to make sure that we give support to students on campus, and especially international students, which kind of brings me to the idea that we were talking about, me and Kelly and Haley, and that was to bring Oasis, our event, to the residents' life. Right. Because, I mean, when we looked at it, many of the people that came to our peer support services were international students being homesick. Yeah. So we sat together and we were like, what can we do to solve this issue? And we found that the whole dynamic of waiting for students to approach us at Oasis is kind of flawed, in my opinion, in my personal opinion. So what we can do is approach students instead where they're most comfortable.
Yeah, because a lot of times if you don't know, you don't know, right? Like, you know, if you wait, but if you're out there being proactive and connecting and engaging, you're going to get folks who maybe would never, maybe because it's just they feel like it's too much for them to do it, they don't know, they're uncertain, or they just don't know about it. So that kind of, I could see how that would be a really positive thing and a positive step to get
Absolutely.
folks.
And another factor that plays into that as well is the stigma around mental health. Yeah. I mean, when I'm at Oasis, because I volunteered at Oasis as well, and I lead the Oasis table, and I realize when people try to come to us, they're a bit hesitant. Yeah. And I sat to myself and I chatted with my co-volunteers. I said, why are they a bit hesitant? Because like students want to come, but then they would turn the other way. So I found it a bit confusing. I started to reflect on it. And I found that it's because of the stigma that society created around mental health, that you can't ask for help because if you ask for help, you're deemed weak by society.
I find it kind of wild for things that cut through cultures and geographic locations, and whether you're in the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere, mental health stigma is there through all of it, which is just it's in all of our cultures. So like to have this type of a group, I can see why it would be so important, obviously, right, to cut through that stigma. But before I move to Haley, why, like I said, you're a social work student. Counseling is part of the wheelhouse. Mental health, mental wellness, it is within the wheelhouse of what you're studying. But why, for you personally, do you connect so much with this?
The only reason I connect with this, I mean, my various work before MUN Minds, I volunteered a lot with community centers as like an after-school counselor. So with that, I realized that there's a lot of marginalized communities who want to ask for help, but due to systemic issues, they can't. I mean, in society, we kind of have this neoliberalistic approach where if people are facing a difficult situation, it's their fault instead of being a systemic issue. And therefore, they're like, why do I need to ask for help? Yeah. I mean, I'm at fault here, even though they're not. I mean, and a lot of things play to it, like race and class. And this is kind of something that is stigmatized, especially to mental health. Because, I mean, it's kind of like a domino effect when you think about it, Adam. Like one thing can affect the other and boom, that's it. Everything falls apart.
I think about a lot in this show when I talk to people. I always think of like almost paths or dividing lines of like, so if sometimes if it's mental wellness supports or mental health supports in the beginning, where someone may end up or if it's when we talk about food insecurity, if you stop that in the beginning and you have it there. And so for these types of actions, it's that, maybe someone's going in this path to wellness as opposed to on another one. Haley Bonnell, first-year PhD student researching peer support, co-chair of MUN Minds. Build on what Tariq is saying there, if you could.
Yeah, I think a lot. I mean, there were so many points that I was
really great points.
Yeah. And I think, MUN Minds really does serve that idea of it doesn't have to be this highly qualified person that you go to get help for these sorts of things. Sometimes you just want to go in a room, you just want to offload everything and go from there. You don't want anyone to tell you what to do. You don't want, someone to weigh in on your life. You just need that offload, get it off your chest, get it off your shoulders, and go on about your day again. And then there's also, peer support works in that way of we can look at other community organizations. If you don't know where to go and you feel in that way of these systems are built against me, I don't know how to get that support, I don't feel like it is for me, this is my fault. You're meeting someone on your own level, because with peer support, it's someone with similar lived experience who has experience in the things you've gone through and has come out on the other side and is able to kind of take that wise outlook on these things and be like, yeah, this is what I did. This is what worked for me. Let's talk about what might work for you. And the person that you're supporting is the person in the driver's seat. So if I don't agree as a peer supporter with something you're doing, that doesn't matter. I leave that at the door. If you want to do something that I don't agree with, sure, let's go. There's ways to reroute and things when it kind of ends up different, but yeah.
And the peer support side, I mean, this is what really helps for folks we've talked a fair bit on the show about peer support and the value of it and just how you can actually feel seen and heard and understood, because the person who's across from you, they may not have the exact same experience as you, but there's enough of it so that when you can kind of understand each other and there's some empathy there, right? Like I know from folks who I've known in the military over the years, right? The things that people would always say is like, in this case, so I'm going back a little bit here, right? 20 odd years ago. But the things that folks, when I was in the reserves, would say when we were out sailing, it would be, my spouse doesn't understand me. My boyfriend doesn't get me. My girlfriend, my parents don't understand me, because they didn't understand the job. But then to have a peer supporter who does understand what it's like to be deployed and to be on, overseas or whatever else, that's the helpful bit.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it comes down to. I mean, we're very close with LifeWise, the gold star of peer support in the province. And they run first responder warm lines. So just for people who have that experience, because it's such an independent experience that someone who has lived experience with other things may not be able to relate to that specific situation. So I think having that consideration for those people in that way with very specific experience where it might feel isolating, having that dedicated line of, yes, these people will get that similar experience. And I think we play a similar role in that with students. I think a lot of students just other people don't get us sometimes. And it can be isolating, even within programs and competitiveness and going into that. And especially when you think of this hidden curriculum that comes with the university kind of context. Having people like myself who are in grad school, have been further along that journey, being able to take that experience of being at MUN for so long and, relaying it to people who are just starting out or people who are really just trying to figure out what they want to do. It's helpful in that way of, this is what I've been through, this is what you might want to do, especially for first-gen university students, because for me it was just throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks.
And I mean, university life has changed so much. I've outdated on it. Like my university experience from 98 to 04, the scenic tour of an arts degree, as I like to say at Memorial University. It was great. Spent a lot of time in the university center. Like that things have changed, right? So you need people like to be with the peer-to-peer side of it.
Exactly.
You need people who are current, who understand now, not like the late 90s when you could, you'd sign up at the for computers at the QE2 use for 15 minutes because you didn't have internet access or a smartphone. Matt, I'm curious about the difference between, we talk about mental health and wellness a lot.
Yeah.
And then there's mental illness.
Yeah.
Can you discuss a bit about that for me?
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. It's one of my favorite subjects to talk about. And even in the introduction that Kelly mentioned for our Thrive Week yesterday, I talked about this. Oftentimes when we start having these conversations around mental health, we oftentimes change that conversation to a discussion about illness and disorders, which is a very natural place for these conversations to go and to be expected. The big issue is that when we only look at disorders and illnesses, individuals who are maybe not experiencing a disorder then also feel isolated. So we talk about this in like peer support is that the fact that people need to feel like they have a space, a sense of belonging. And part of that is making sure that what they're experiencing is validated. So when we start talking about mental health, we need to recognize that every person has mental health, right? Every person has physiological health where we need to make sure we're eating right, that we're exercising, that we're getting regular checkups. It's the same thing with mental health. And there's different aspects to wellness that you can kind of dig into. But mental health is something that we all need to have some ownership of. We all need to learn not only coping skills, but also how to just be aware of what's going on in our own body and our own minds, and how the environment around us is affecting what's going on there, right?
Yeah, sometimes I'll be feeling a certain way, and I've started trying to ask myself, like, why do you feel this way? And what might the inputs be around that? And how do you, if it's not a good feeling, how do you not feel? Like, what do you need? And so whether it's running or whatever else. And I've also tried, and correct if I go astray on this,
Let's
correct,
do it. Yeah.
please. But
I'd rather people make mistakes and talk about it, right?
Because I used to, for a little while, sometimes I feel what I would refer to as anxiety. But then at a previous show, I realized I shouldn't be talking, because I have anxiety. But I've not talked to anyone about it or anything else. No, I have these feelings. But then it was just maybe I should just think a little bit more about how I'm feeling. Look at, was Friday night a little bit more an extra glass of wine than I should have? Is that the cause there? Yeah. And am I running enough? Am I eating properly? But it's more to internalize it as opposed to always be like, oh, I have anxiety. It's because when you actually go to a mental health professional, and if you actually do have anxiety, that's a different thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's actually a really good point to bring up, right? So, and we see this, especially in the social media age, there's a lot of conversation around I have this thing because I experience one thing that's associated with what's a disorder, right? So anxiety is actually a really great example of this, is that anxiety itself is a very natural thing for every single person to feel. Yeah. And anxiety is actually very evolutionarily adaptive, right? So for the other psychology student in the room, we talk about this all the time, right? Is the fact that anxiety helps motivate us. Anxiety helps us recognize things that are important. Anxiety helps us recognize things that we maybe need to be aware of so that we can address it. A disorder is something very different. A disorder is something where we are persistently feeling anxiety. A disorder is maybe we're feeling more anxiety than we should have in response to something. And that's still equally important. But when we think about the fact that every single person experiences anxiety, and we don't ever have these conversations with people about, hey, it's actually natural that you're going to feel anxiety. It's natural that we need to understand that that's a real feeling and how we can respond to it. And maybe that's, to exactly your point, Adam, we need to then kind of look at ourselves and be like, what are some of the things that could have contributed to this? And maybe what are some of the things that I can do about it? Or even is this just actually a natural level of anxiety that is probably good and helpful to me?
Totally. I before you folks got here today, I was in a meeting because we're looking at Remembrance Day. I'm going to be doing something live for TV streaming type of thing. I will feel anxiety around that, but also. Yeah, sure. And that's how, maybe I'll perform better that way too. So this is how I'm unpacking all of these thinkings for the conversation. So then for everyone who's listening across the province, but also now through the student lens, if we're talking about taking care of ourselves so that our mental health and wellness doesn't worsen into mental illness, what are some other things we should keep into account?
Yeah, totally. Haley, you might be better to speak to this, just around like aspects of wellness, right? But when we talk about wellness, in peer support, and particularly the training that a lot of our peer supporters receive, is we talk about 5 aspects of wellness, and we talk about there being need for physical health, which is, I think, a pretty obvious one. If we're not taking care of ourselves physically, we're not mentally going to feel well. We talk about emotional health, so being able to recognize the emotions that we're experiencing, recognize what might be causing those, whether they're good or bad. And I'm even apprehensive to use the terms good or bad for a lot of emotions. Spiritual health is one thing that I think a lot of people kind of get a bit confused on. We automatically associate that with religious practices, but that doesn't need to be the case, right? This can be things like mindfulness practices, being able to connect with nature, sometimes physically taking care of yourself. So I know you're a runner. Going out and going on a run on a trail is probably going to be kind of double checking boxes there for you. Yeah. Intellectual health. So does somebody actually feel challenged? Does their need to learn, is that actually matching what they're receiving? Right. So there's a lot of different things that you can look at when we consider those aspects that people don't always consider. And sometimes I can name friends in my life that when they're experiencing negative mental health, the first thing that they do is they go, well, I'm just going to go on a run. And it's like, okay, but maybe we should look at some mindfulness stuff, or maybe we should actually process why we're feeling what we're feeling. And being able to kind of have that conversation and be able to take care of like different aspects of your life can go such a long way for anybody being able to experience better wellness, right?
Yeah, because like, oh, go for a run, check. Like, no, did you think about what? Like, give it the extra, like you said, mindfulness and extra thoughts on this.
I think there's so many dimensions that people don't realize or think about. Because when I look at it, if you look at a full wellness inventory and assessment of what you're doing, there's like 12 dimensions. So you've got movement, which we've kind of included, which encompasses, that can be anything to anyone, like running to you. You think of your physical health and how does that affect your mental health. But we want to look at movement and call it that way, or you can call it whatever you want. But a term is that might be gardening for an hour in the backyard, that you're cleaning up, your hands are in the dirt, which includes all your mindfulness and the senses around that. So what is it that helps you to become more grounded and less having less, I'm going to use the word anxious, and feeling less anxious? Because I think just a point that they've made here is around, we're all easily jumping to disorders and labeling what we have when we haven't even had a real assessment by a professional who is able to diagnose with those. So, and I think it's very important, if you pay attention, transcending what it is that in our relationships are a major, major piece of our lives. So, your work relationships, your intimate relationships, social relationships. And lots of students, when they come here from away, whether you're from around the Bay or you're from another country, halfway or around the world, and then you come here and you are lonely. You know nobody. And then that's what a lot of these services and supports can do to help students as resources. And that's a big piece of what these MUN Minds student groups are doing. And I know that, because we kind of say people need a circle of care, but sometimes it's not needed as formal as that. I think that's for maybe long-standing chronic or serious mental health issues or problems, so that students can come in and speak to someone that's a peer supporter, maybe help get them connected to other resources, supports and services at MUN that can actually help, almost like a social connector.
Yep.
Because for the more serious examples and mental health disorders, you're looking at a higher level of case management. But when you think of this is a lot of times what people need, no matter the age.
So then is that doing some of the work of, like, when you have I'll just call it that TikTok self-diagnosis that can go on, or whatever from social media, is part of that folks just trying to make sense of the world themselves, and also maybe trying to join a bit of a tribe so that they feel less isolated? Because for everything you're saying, it sounds like this is like, it's like, sure, you're doing this, but also, can we offer you this?
Yeah. And I think, it's a weird phenomenon of I think it's this search for community of, there are people whose brains work like I do. And I think to some extent, all of our brains work the same. We all have this drive for connection. We all have this drive for, other people in our lives and a sense of passion and meaning. And I think, to your point, that was something first when we tried our peer support groups. We tried, the instant is, ADHD support group, anxiety support group, depression, grief, you name it. These negative, not negative, but they're sad and they're
all the things really in your feelings,
exactly.
right? Really, really deep.
Yeah.
And we found we weren't getting a lot of uptake with these groups, and we were kind of like, but this is, people are looking for services for these types of things that they face. And I think that came to A, the stigma, and B, that thought of, do I really want to go to a group and talk about my depression today in the middle of my school day? And so we kind of sat back and thought about it a little bit and had this idea of, we had an art-based support group at the same time, and that one was getting a steady following every single week. So we were like, what are they doing that's different? And it was this idea of, you don't have to go and talk about these things. You can, you're having a great day. You don't want to have that offload and conversation about your mental health. Sure. But you can go and do a fun activity, paint a picture with like-minded people who may be experiencing the same things. And if those conversations do come up, then great. There's a trained person there for it. But it comes down to that social connection and belongingness that I think often gets lost in the university context, because you hear of, the university partying, fun time. You shouldn't do that. You should be focusing on your studies. But you can't be doing that all the time. And then to what extent is the partying and, going out having a great time, to what extent is that healthy? Yeah. Whereas you have a sit-down, fun, cozy time. I run a peer support group based on fiber arts, crochet, that sort of thing. And it's, I sit down in the middle of my day and I crochet. And it's this... It brings together people who may want to learn, who are already doing those crafts, and we just sit down, and if anything comes up, then sure, but there's no pressure to come in and kind of talk about your mental health if you don't want to that day. And
you're not feeling like you're just automatically going in for what may or may not be, but there's a likelihood or a chance of a trauma dump each and every time. As opposed,
exactly.
It's like, no, crocheting is great, and maybe I do talk about my feelings today, or we just crochet in silence
exactly.
or whatever, right?
Yeah, and so there's, the opportunity for friendships and things instead of just, my depression was bad today, or my depression was good today. This is how I'm feeling. It can be exhausting to be that connected with yourself all the time. I think there is, there's a degree of lack of connection with ourselves sometimes in general society of, you need that check-in to check in with yourself. What am I feeling today? What is going to make me feel good? And often, talking about how you feel, yeah, sometimes, but it's not every time that's what's going to fill your cup. Sometimes it's incorporating that self-care, and groups like these can incorporate that self-care in your day on a weekly basis if you don't know where else to fit it in. So we find it's pretty good.
Tariq, for yourself, as when you see someone who perhaps might be isolated and lonely, but sometimes you can start to see progress, whether it's one moment in a conversation or more once you get to know people. So, and then if it is someone that's kind of building community, what's that like from your vantage point?
I feel like if you want to make sure that people are actually progressing in terms of their mental health, it's by community bonding. Like we all mentioned, you know, it's by actually knowing the people. You know, the only reason that people come to peer support or like peer support groups is because they're trying to talk out. Now, if I'm feeling depressed, for example, I'm not going to be like, you know what, Adam, I'm feeling depressed.
Yeah.
That's not how it usually works. It builds over various steps, like getting to build a rapport. That's one thing. Like, hey, Adam, we have similar things in common. Like, I like running, you like running. We build that established, and then we move on to the next step, getting to know each other on a personal level. And it moves on from there, and therefore, I could feel comfortable enough with you to tell you that, you know what, Adam, I feel depressed. I'm feeling anxious. Absolutely.
What are the divide? Like, I think generationally on campus, you know, from profs to folks working there. Like, what are some of the generational or other divides around mental health, mental wellness, and thought these days? And are there disconnects of like maybe the new crop of students, like, or you know, you think of the folks who came through with the pandemic and in university, and it's kind of like, oh, don't know if I understand everything you've been through, or if I could even connect because you're different than I was at this age, and for reasons.
Yeah. So I kind of have a unique perspective on this because I went back to university in my 30s.
Yeah.
So going into a classroom when you're a little bit older and sitting next to, you know, people who just graduated high school is tough. Right. The things that they're concerned about, that they're stressed about, as you have a little bit of life experience, don't seem like that as big of a deal. But being able to kind of reflect back on your experiences, you can also be like, oh, I remember when it was like that. But I think to the point that you're making there is that generational divides are a pretty big thing. Every generation is going to have something different. And I mean, I feel like actually Haley and I had a conversation about this earlier today where we're not that different in age, but my opinion on how to approach certain things is quite different to hers. And sometimes it's just being able to stop, take a breath, and one of my favorite quotes is "Be curious, not judgmental."
Yeah.
Right. So being able to just ask some questions and be open to the fact that people don't have malicious intent. They're not doing things negatively because that's what they want to do. They're oftentimes responding to a way that they're feeling, right? So I don't know if you guys have...
Yeah, no, just to add on to your point, Matt, I mean, I come from a Middle Eastern culture. I come from Egypt, and there's not a lot of mental health programs or services.
Yeah.
So if you go, for example, to university counselor or school and you be like, you know what, I'm feeling depressed, they're going to be like, what? How could you be depressed? And unfortunately, some people have, like we mentioned, systemic issues. So if you're there to complain that, you know what, I'm anxious or I'm depressed because of these issues, you are deemed unfit or not proper, and therefore they're going to send you, and it's like a real thing, to a mental institution.
Right.
For what? Because you complain that you have depression. Yeah. And unfortunately, this exists. But we have to look at the main root cause. Why do they have depression? Why are they anxious? And a lot of things, you know, accumulates to that. I mean, for instance, here, it's academic stress. I mean, like Haley mentioned previously, many programs, and including the social work program as well, it's very competitive. And including myself, I mean, I'm speaking from a personal experience, you kind of feel anxious because you're like, am I going to get in or am I not? And if I don't get in, what's the next step? So therefore, it's kind of the academic stress. And then there's the financial stress. I mean, there's a rise in tuition. So many students are like working 1 job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, trying to pay for tuition while having a mandatory full 5-course load.
Yeah, and then maybe going to the campus food bank or just trying to figure out where the meal, and like in that range of food insecurity of you're working a couple of jobs, but then, oh, it's exam time, so maybe I take fewer shifts, but still got to eat. Now you've got that stress, that beginning bit of food insecurity, of the stress, and then maybe it's the evolution, unfortunately, into skipping meals and whatever else that comes with it. And then you're dealing with this stigma, shame, which is it'd be great to undo it, but it is still associated with going to a food bank and walking in and taking that as well. Absolutely. So all of that. What was your journey like? You mentioned Egypt, right?
That's right.
How much, like, when you were growing up, like, were you unlearning when you were here around mental health and stigma, and if this is too personal, let me know.
No.
But what was your path of, like, was this something you had and you learned growing up, or did you unlearn, or did things change for you, or were you always similar to who you are now? Speaking, like, I know you've learned about mental health because you're studying it, but was this a path you're already on?
I mean, coming from Egypt, to be honest, like I mentioned previously, there's not a lot of awareness around mental health.
Yeah.
So
You seem very aware right now because you're here talking about it. So
exactly. I mean, growing up, like, obviously my family was kind of a bit open-minded because, like, my mom, she's like a social work assistant. Okay. So she grew up with that mindset that you shouldn't judge people for feeling this sort of way. But in the main dominant culture, right, there's no such thing as mental health.
Yeah.
Like, I'm being completely serious, not even exaggerating. There's no such thing as mental health.
Yeah.
Like, you can't go and be like, oh, I'm complaining because of my bills. Well, tough it up.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to sound, but that's an actual reality. If you dare to complain that, oh, well, I'm stressed because the program's competitive, well, switch out. Well, deal with it. And now I had a thought about it, and I'm like, why does society, and especially the dominant society, tell us to deal with our problems instead of addressing it? And it's because of systemic issues. I mean, many systemic problems don't want to be solved, and, like, people who are, like, in high positions do not want to solve it. So what do they do if they don't want to solve it? Blame it on the people.
Yeah.
Simple. And as I came to Canada, I started to learn more about mental health by seeing it in real life. Like, for example, in high school dynamics. Like, if students are actually stressed, they go to a guidance counselor. In Egypt, that's not even such a thing. Right? And the rise of social workers here, I mean, that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to do social work. Because in Egypt, social work is not even a profession. Right? So I was like, why don't I become a social worker so maybe I can get my knowledge and my experience from a country where it acknowledges mental health, and then I can go and spread that knowledge.
Right.
That's excellent. That's awesome, Tariq.
Thank you.
So glad to hear more of your story today. And I think it's certainly so important that where we come from different ages. You know, you can start with Tariq, and then we go to Haley, and then we go to Matt, then you, then me.
Yeah.
So just because of what we had or we experienced does not help sharing or us being a peer supporter or listener for a student, or it could be a staff or a faculty person at Memorial. So it's so important that we have so much that you can offer someone and they can choose what they think is best for them, because you know yourself best, not someone else. So it's so important, and it's so great to sit here today and hear. And Adam, from the questions that you're asking and how you're facilitating this, so much tells us that you get this.
Trying to.
but you do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
By the way you're facilitating this.
And just to add to your point, Kelly, I feel like when we talk about mental health resources, in my opinion, as a peer supporter and outreach coordinator, when a person is feeling down or like rock bottom, they only need one thing and one thing only that we could offer them. It's not services, it's just a listening ear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to actually listen to the person and not interrupting them. I mean, one thing that we learn currently in social work is that when you're approaching a client, or we call it in social work a service user, it's not to have the professional versus expert or professional versus a client approach, because you're not superior to these people because you are, feeling well or you're feeling happy and they're feeling rock bottom. That doesn't mean that you're on top. It doesn't mean that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what you can do, and you have privilege. When you have privilege, you could help people who are rock bottom, and by listening to them, by actually being there, just staying silent, even if it means being awkward. That's one thing that I learned being a peer supporter, just sitting with a person who's coming and talking to you. If the room is awkward silent, let it be.
Yeah.
Let it be silent.
It's a huge thing. And I think I think a good point to make with all of this too is when you're, I think all of us in this room right now, the main thing is we want to help people. And it comes into this, when is it that you're jumping in too much and it's not actually helpful? And I think, there can be, especially in peer support, like I was saying earlier, if you have someone who is doing something or they're on a path that you totally don't agree with and you think there's a better way, it can be really hard to avoid that urge to jump in and be like, no, you can't do this. Sometimes there is learning for people from going on mistakes and having, you know, that experience to look back on. We can't protect everyone from everything, no matter what we look at it from our point of view. And, you know, it just comes to this helping. Sometimes we just want to jump on the train tracks for the people, but it's actually not helpful. So you kind of need to have that, I guess, boundaries as well in helping. And it can be exhausting sometimes.
And it kind of reminded me of something as well. I mean, right now in social work, we have a course. It's called Knowledge and Intervention Skills. So what we do with the assignments is that we have like a mock actor or actress, and they come to us and we have to be that social worker on site. And I remember from my personal experience, like the first interview, I was so thinking about asking questions rather than actually incorporating what's being said to me. I mean, some peer supporters, right, we're all guilty of this. We focus on advice giving rather than actually listening.
What am I going to say next?
Exactly. And what the person needs is just for you to listen. Yeah. That's all they need. They don't need advice.
And being non-judgmental, which is what all of you have said here today. And being still, being quiet. Mm-hmm. And it's not always about, we shouldn't be giving advice or telling people what to do.
No. I found sometimes with friends, it's like, are you looking for advice or do you want me to listen? Because I can do both. You know, like if you need some advice, I don't know how good it's going to be. I have it, but also I can just listen. And as opposed to being like, what advice do we need to give right now, which is going to not be great anyways, because I'm not in the position to offer it.
Yeah.
Tariq, what was the term you said? Not client, a service user now?
Service user.
So this is the evolution of the language.
Exactly. And I was curious about this, and I went after class and I asked one of my profs, why did you refer instead of a client, a service user? And the reason was kind of very interesting in my opinion, because I mean, we kind of live under a discourse, which is like the system of meanings or ideas that we learn through the dominant society. And client could be seen through like a biomedical standpoint. And this is kind of very, very dangerous when it comes to mental health, because the biomedical discourse just states that any mental health thing, like Matt mentioned, like feeling anxious, it needs to be treated. Like there's no such thing as, oh, well, maybe we can work through connecting with nature or mindfulness. No, get treated, meds, etc. Right? So this is what the biomedical discourse does. So when you're referring to someone as a client, it means that they're getting treated. No.
Or a patient.
Or a patient, exactly. This kind of language demeans a person as weak. Or like a service user, they think, oh, well, I'm a client, I'm a patient, that means and like they think something is wrong with them instead of being like, there's something wrong with society. So therefore, the proper term is a service user, because technically they're using a service to their own advantage.
Yeah, I think it was last year we did a show and we were talking about that word client. I think it was under a slightly different context, and I don't know if it was a mental health one or not for the conversation. But the issue that folks in the studio with me had around it was that they said it feels too transactional, and they're like, I am a person. And they was getting to, like, they didn't use your language, but that was where they were. It was like, you know, wanting assistance to use, you know, to be a service user, as opposed to this transactional bit of being a client, which they, in these cases, they didn't like. And I always, the change in language sometimes and terminology as things move forward, I'm always fascinated by it and the backstory.
Yeah, so it's actually interesting that you're talking about that history, because the switch, at least in this psychological lens, from patient to client actually happened as a result of exactly what we're talking about. So Carl Rogers' is client-centered approach is his big thing.
Yeah.
One of my idols, being able to look at the fact that self-determinance of the person knowing what they need to do, listening non-judgmentally, a lot of these things that we've talked about today, his approach specifically was the fact that he didn't want to treat patients. He wanted it to be a mutual relationship that people are working with. And that was in like the 1960s. So it's interesting, you're bringing up the history of it, that even just in that relatively short time, that language has evolved now that itself actually has some stigma associated with it too.
Yeah, and because over time we learn, we talk more, we communicate, and also like what was a good idea at the time because of the intention behind it. Yeah. All of a sudden it's like, and actually we still need to keep talking about it, because there's a road that this can keep being pushed.
I think that that's 50 some years ago, possibly even more, from Carl Rogers, and we all have those foundations and the social determinants of health, of where we all come from, no matter what degree you do at Memorial and other universities, is to be strengths-based and moving forward, right?
Absolutely.
And I think with what you're talking about, the biomedical model is certainly around that piece with diagnosing and being more about treating the physical health aspect of it, but where there's so much more and so much other things that could be done to help.
So then what else is needed? Like you have everything you talked. So you talked about, we started the show talking about what's available this week and MUN Minds, peer-to-peer support, all of this stuff. What else? Like, where's the push going? What else is needed for campus and mental wellness and well-being?
Oh, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Lots of things.
Yeah.
And that.
The first word that comes for me is awareness. In starting my PhD work on peer support in particular, it's people aren't aware of this service and they don't know what to expect going into it. So that's kind of where this outreach thing came with MUN Minds, of having a table at Oasis and being, have you heard of MUN Minds? This is what peer support is. This is what it does. But especially in the university context, and I think even in the general community, I have to explain what peer support is and what it does so much all the time. And I think great strides are being made, but realizing that this is a service that is available and free, and a good, complement to the traditional mental health model is a big part.
Yeah, I think it's important with peer support to remember too that it is a very valuable service, but it can also only do so much, right? Yes. Peer supporters, there's kind of a little bit more of a push now on actually having peer support as a recognized role, as certifications, which is great and definitely something that's needed. But there's also that understanding of levels of care and what people might need. And when we talk about mental health especially, we talked about some of these aspects of well-being earlier. There is a role of having to have medical doctors involved in that there's sometimes people are going to need medication and there shouldn't be stigma associated with that, right? The same way that if we're having issues with our heart or our kidney, we're going to have to take some medication to help with that. Sometimes there's some disorders that we're just going to need to take some medication for, and that's okay, right? There is a role in that of having clinical psychologists who are able to not only assess these things that are going on, but also be able to offer real tangible education on how people to move forward. Social workers in helping address some of the systemic pieces and being able to support in finding resources. Really, the short answer to your question of what else is needed is more. Yeah. Yes. We need more social workers. We need more clinical psychologists. We need a system that is easier to access these services in. And, we talked a lot about peer support today, which I think is a super relevant thing to talk about. The way I personally see peer support kind of evolving in the system is being able to help people navigate where they actually need to go. So as an example, we do a lot of work with LifeWise. LifeWise now has peer supporters in so many of the facilities around the province and the NL Health Services. And it's interesting to hear that these peer supporters are now being part of the conversations about how to approach care for individuals and helping give context to professionals that, coming back to Tariq's point earlier of that transactional relationship, peer supporters don't actually feel like it's transactional, right? They feel like somebody who is an advocate. And so the peer support there, I think, is the best word for them is advocates. And kind of building off of that, we do need more clinical psychologists in our province. And that's something that I think everybody would acknowledge.
More medical doctors,
and more
nurse
MDs,
practitioners.
Right? There's lots of professions that we do need to have more people in. And we go back to systemic questions. Some of that is just not being able to actually train those individuals and getting them into roles. Some of it is pieces just around the state of the province right now, and we're training people and they're not necessarily staying. That's a much bigger conversation to have. But the short answer to your question is more.
More resources, more staffing, more than just meeting the short-term needs of people. And of course, I'm lucky. I get to call. I don't have to say client or patients or consumers or because I call, they're all students.
Exactly.
And that's the population I work with, which is absolutely wonderful. But we need more resources, funding, things that can help students and employees. And this is not only at the institutional level, it goes for so much higher and systemically, but, so much more resources, funding. We need to meet the long-term needs of everyone, and that's academically, personally, and career-wise for now and in the future so that they can take all of this with them. And the skills, it starts as promotion and prevention. It goes further than awareness into the education. And that starts at that level of people being able to, when they walk into doorways in the community or the mental health facility and addictions, that there's a peer supporter there who is trained, but as well has lived experience that can be so helpful.
And you want the whole path, or so from the prevention side of the conversation, which also includes, housing and food and all, all the basics of life.
Yes.
To when you think there is some help needed, at the end of that path, the person that you need to see is there on a timely basis. Now, that can be with substance use and addictions. That can be for for different other types of mental illness, or like a heart attack, whatever. I mean, this kind of is a big part of the conversation we've been having today as well, right? Wrapped in all of it, social determinants of health and the systems that we have in this province.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's more having that proactive approach as opposed to reactive, right? Yeah. Which a lot of our systems are set up to do that right now, where we are set up so that when somebody is in crisis, they have somewhere to go, and maybe there's still some efficiencies there that can be ironed out. Yeah. But, research time and time again has shown that exactly what you're talking about, Adam, right? Like if you are dealing with kind of the basic needs for individuals, we're already going to bring that bar down of what that experience that a person is going to have, right, and how severe that is.
And that certainly demonstrates the various factors that people are facing that can certainly affect their mental health and well-being, and vice versa.
Absolutely. And just to add on to another... to add on to another point, I worked at Buckmaster's Community Circle previously, and one approach that they did, and I'm a big fan of it, and I still think about it daily, is that instead of instead of making the community members come to them, they would go to the community members. Right. In a university setting, and especially when we're speaking about mental health, instead of waiting for students to come to us, why can't we go to them?
Yeah.
And I remember me and Haley and Kelly, we sat in a meeting and the two geniuses brought up an idea. And they were like, how could we come to students? Yeah. I mean, we set up the Oasis table, true, and we give resources to students, but that does not fulfill the mission, does it? Because some students, like I mentioned previously, they're still hesitant, or there's stigma around mental health, therefore they can't come to us. So what do we do in that case? So we thought about it, and we were like, why can't we go where they're most comfortable? Yeah. And that is like, for example, let's say we can go to a community center, for example, right, where we could reach community members and therefore build a rapport. Because rapport is what matters when it comes to like mental health approach. And we're actually thinking about this idea. We're probably going to launch it around Christmas time, but we haven't decided yet. It's not official. But we're going to try to bring Oasis to residents. So residence is composed of like 7 to 6 houses, I think. So they have the main house, the Hatcher's house. So what we're thinking is we're going to bring Oasis to the residents' life. So it's easier for people who live on residence to access these mental health services more.
That's over the holidays, because a lot of students are still in campus housing.
Yeah, and if you talk isolation, then a
Yeah.
holiday period,
Everyone is
Amped.
gone.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And look at that. We're out of time. Kelly, Tariq, Haley, Matt, thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, everyone. Thoughts for today? I think there's tons in today's show for everyone in this province listening. Food for thought. If you want to let me know about it, the Signal at cbc.ca. Call the Signal line and leave a message, 709-576-5260. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the federal budget, and we're going to talk about where the PM is putting the spending and what it means for all of us in this province and what it means for the country. I've got a panel in to splice, dice, tear it all apart, and spit it back out in a way we can understand. Thanks for listening. Cheers.